You stare at the list of monsters resting upon your nightstand, trying to decide which beast should be the next that you ask the Loremaster about. Since the last one, you have struggled to select a new choice, as most nights, when you finally get to relax, sleep rapidly approaches. Your training sessions have become even more brutal over the last week, especially the magic lessons. To the Loremaster's apparent annoyance, your control over the winds of magic defies any explanation that he can conjure up. According to the tomes you have been studying in the first few nights of lessons, humans are only able to effectively control one of the 8 winds effectively. Yet, the spells you unleashed against the unholy blade were those of Qaish, known more commonly as the lore of high magic, which should have been impossible. While this mystery certainly perplexes you, it seems to outright enrage the Loremaster, and he has developed quite the habit of hurling various teaching implements at you during evening lessons, when one of his new theories doesn't pan out. You idly rub at one of your more impressive bruises as you scan the list again, your gaze lingering on one particular line. Perhaps if you ask about a creature of profound magical construction, it may yield some fruitful answers. As you go looking for the Loremaster through the winding hallways of this strange home, you tap into the subtle shadow magic and let it guide your steps. Stepping over a threshold, you find yourself not at the Loremaster's door like you had intended, but instead standing outside the colossal portal that leads into the library. Perplexed by this strange occurrence, you start to turn away when the warmth in your chest returns, just as it does whenever you manipulate the winds of magic. Curiosity fills you, and you reach out, placing one hand against the Drakewald oak. After a moment, a peculiar pulse surges through your arm, and some of the runes upon the door flash as if in recognition. Before you can progress further, whirling shadows envelop you, and suddenly you are in front of the Loremaster's door, firelight pouring out from the crack. How strange, but that will be something to look into later. For now, you must focus. Oh, it's you. Welcome, my dear student. Please, have a seat. Excellent timing, as I had just finished my work for the evening. Here to continue your lessons into the most exotic of the world's monsters. Good. So which terror have you chosen to learn about this night? Ah, a most auspicious choice, and quite pertinent to your studies. Here, I just finished making this treat to enjoy. I call it hot chocolate. Quite the delectable drink, using cocoa from the Southlands mixed with an assortment of sweeteners and other things. I think a halfling taught it to me some time ago, though I've improved upon it, I think. You will want it to hold off the chill from this tale, I can assure you. Roughly a decade ago, I was journeying through the harsh deserts that comprise the land of the dead, far to the south of here. I had been hired on to an expedition by the Dark Elves of Nagaroth upon a black ark known as the Tempest of Cain. At some point, I will need to educate you on how to properly negotiate contracts with the more violently inclined races of the world. But for now, we will skip ahead to the important aspect of that journey. The Druchi have provided me with a journal containing the mad ramblings of some notable explorer among the High Elves, who had apparently been captured quite some time ago. Their mind long since lost to insanity, the Dark Elves received little pleasure from torturing them. But when the Asur kept screaming in the night about some nightmarish monster, it attracted the curiosity of an ambitious High Beastmaster. That is where I came in, deciphering the route the deceased elf took on his travels through the burning realm of sand, where he supposedly encountered some unspeakable horror. Following behind me was an entire legion, disgorged from the depths of the Tempest of Cain. Quite an impressive host, assembled with the sole purpose of capturing this mysterious creature. High Beastmasters do have a rather obsessive habit of trying to acquire monstrous specimens. In any event, we had made good progress into the ancient lands of Nehekara, managing to sneak past the sepulchral stalkers that guarded the outmost borders belonging to Bagar, the eternal necropolis. I made certain to unleash powerful wards to ensure the Tomb Kings remained unaware of us, as while the Dark Elves' host was quite impressive, I had little faith in their promises of safeguarding my life in the event of battle. As we continued further south among the towering dunes, I noticed that only a few entries remained detailing the High Elf's travels before he encountered whatever it was that broke his mind. Consulting the scrawled instructions, while ignoring the growing complaints of the impatient Beastmaster, I led the column past a curious set of hills that had been carved into the shape of skulls, when I finally found our goal. Before me, the ground gradually sank downwards, until it evened out into a circular, flat depression. In the center of this space rested an immense obelisk made of jet black stone, perhaps some form of obsidian. Carved upon it were a great number of runes that even at great distance I could easily tell contained a truly impressive amount of warnings and curses. I turned to the High Beastmaster leading the Dark Elves, informing them that while we had likely found the source of the Asur's madness, I heavily recommended not going any further. There was no telling what kind of evil awaited us. Honestly, looking back, I don't know why I bothered, as of course the arrogance of the Druchi outweighed any caution, and their master signaled his troops forward. Over 2,000 Dark Elves marched down the slope as the sun beat down on us, great walls of dust kicked up by their passing. Scourge Runner chariots and Cold One Knights fanned out around the flanks of the black armored host, while in the back the Beastmaster stood alongside his prized beasts, being 2 hydras and a trio of manticores ready for battle. He had even managed to acquire one of the famed sorceresses of Grond for this venture, likely promising the hag mother of the Witch King any magical trinkets we happened upon. Still, I kept my distance, standing a good few paces away from the start of the descent, as I knew quite well when the Nehekarns warned of curses and death, only the foolish tested them. As the first of the Dark Elf scouts neared the base of the obelisk, the earth began to shake violently. The horde from the Tempest of Cain drew their weapons, and prepared as the vibrations became far stronger, the various war beasts and monsters shrieking in alarm. I feared that we had disturbed the slumber of a necrosphinx, and I prayed for it to be anything else. Oh, what a foolish wish that turned out to be. From the southern side of the obelisk, the sand began to bulge upwards as something massive rose from underneath. The Druki army faced the oncoming threat, as the dome of cascading sand continued to rise further and further. Inexorably, an ancient colossus emerged into view from the clouds of whirling dust, crawling forward to reveal a myth made real. A titanic scarab construct, masterfully carved from onyx and stone, bejeweled and enameled with wealth and glory of a bygone age. As it lumbered into full view, I felt the winds of magic whip into a hurricane, the very existence of this behemoth resulting in tremendous amounts of magic being drawn towards it. Even from my elevated viewpoint, I could not help but fall back in shock at the mind-bending size of this creature. Even the most impressive sphinxes and bone giants were easily dwarfed in comparison. Yet for all its terrifying stature and foreboding bladed limbs, the construct could only be described as achingly beautiful. Tears streamed down my face, for to witness such a marvelous creation is truly to be blessed by the gods. I had found a Khemric Titan. My reverie shattered when entire volleys of barbed bolts and Ravager harpoons launched towards the behemoth, each shattering on impact with the stone skin of the construct. As more of the Dark Elves began to unleash their ranged weapons against the Khemric Titan, I started to wonder if it had even noticed the invading army. It just stood there, though so far nothing had managed to so much as crack any piece of the monstrosity, as the materials it had been comprised from were absurdly tough. Then I saw it. Just above the immense golden scarab head, there had been placed an ancient shrine that to my experienced eyes rippled with godlike power. A collection of mummified bodies had been entombed around it, and from what I could make out of the mortuary incantations and ritual markings, these individuals must have been some of the greatest heroes of their age. To have enshrined them all within a single construct, even one of such impossible size, meant that this creature may as well have been a god. The shrine pulsed with arcane energy, and the sands all around the Druki erupted into a sudden sandstorm. They screamed in alarm, blinded and disoriented by the impressive hex. Thundering booms rang out as the Khemric Titan started to close the distance between it and the front line, the ponderous steps covering an impressive distance in concerningly short time. I detected the distinct shouts of a counterspell as the sandstorm collapsed, having been dispelled by the sorceress. At the High Beastmaster's command, another impressive volley shot into the air, this time the Scourge Runner chariots focusing their harpoons at the same chunk of the monster. To my surprise, this worked. 2 of the missiles able to penetrate the onyx underbelly of the Titan. The construct, of course, ignored the wound, being as such things cannot feel pain anyway, and tore into the front line of the Dark Elves to cataclysmic results. Its immense scythe-bladed forearms lashed out with shocking speed and accuracy, slicing through infantry with laughable ease regardless of their armor. The elves swarmed the portions of the Khemric Titan they could reach, their spears, halberds, and dryaks having virtually no effect against such defenses. For a solid minute, the behemoth seemed frozen, as if making complicated calculations, before it leaned down and opened its massive jaws. The Druki continued to vent their bloodlust against their foe, landing a comically large number of strikes that rarely did much in the way of damage before realizing their peril. A peculiar sound echoed out across the battlefield, like some hidden gate sliding open, and moments later a tidal wave of scarabs came pouring out of the Khemric Titan's mouth. Agonized shrieks reached my ears almost immediately, as I saw these were the incredibly infamous flesh-eating scarabs, used long ago in horrific Nehekaran rituals. From an academic perspective, I found myself quite intrigued to see that the insects are more than capable of devouring even a heavily armored blackguard in roughly 4 seconds. Quite impressive. Dozens of soldiers were devoured by the hungering swarm before the elves managed to stem the tide. A mass collection of bloody skeletons strewn across the field. Before they could recover, the monster then lifted its bladed legs and brought them arcing down to impale those too slow to leap aside, often crushing a handful of souls with each insectoid appendage. The shrine atop its head surged with power once more, but this time, instead of conjuring the wrath of the sands, I watched as the cracked and shattered hide of the Titan knit itself back to flawless design. I barked out a bitter laugh. Of course, this ancient wonder possessed the ability to repair itself from damage. It seemed my dwindling employers realized this as well, for the Beastmaster finally released his prized creations. The manticores tore into the sky, the most impressive of their trio bearing the general upon its saddle. Both hydras waddled forward, belching torrents of flame that barely managed to blacken the construct's stone carapace. Another combined volley of harpoons and bolt managed to score a telling blow on the Khemric Titan, but this time it seemed to notice. After pausing, as it always seemed to do between attacks, the lumbering behemoth's shrine flashed with arcane might, before launching an eldritch beam from its 2 eyes that slammed into the Scourge Runner chariots, instantly obliterating the entire line of mobile artillery into piles of dust. The reaping blade struck out once more, this time butchering one of the manticores that, despite its impressive speed, proved unable to avoid the colossal 4-limb blades. Finally, the hydras arrived to reinforce the infantry line, slamming into the Titan's nearest leg, and with support from the sorceress, began to tear apart the enchanted metal. It hurt my heart, honestly, to see such an elegant creature wounded so grievously. But it fought on. The behemoths staggered about, being of such colossal size and weight that it managed to stomp upon one of the hydras and impaled the beast to the ground. Gouts of blood drenching the sand around the still twitching corpse. Still, the Dark Elves numbered in the thousands, and despite the near impenetrable body of the Khemric Titan, it began to suffer from the endless onslaught of attacks. I feared that I had been fated to witness the destruction of one of the world's few remaining wonders, when the monster unleashed its response to this predicament. The air around the construct started to distort, just as crawling darkness suddenly plunged the immediate area around it into night. This was no illusion, however, as I could detect screaming faces and ear-rending shrieks emitting from the summoned cloud of pure blackness that promised the chill terror of the eternal grave. Easily far enough away to avoid its effects, I could appreciate what nightmares the magical substance impressed upon those drenched in it, as nearly all of the Dark Elves panicked and began to flee in all directions, tearing at themselves in sheer terror. As thousands of infantry and even the Hydra ran from the Titan, it disgorged another wave of flesh-eating beetles, before the shrine once again set about repairing its damaged body. Just as it reconnected one of its sundered legs, I watched the High Beastmaster come streaking out of the sky upon his favored beast, directing it to slam into the Shrine of Eternities, where the Khemric Titan clearly harnessed the magical energies that it stored and needed to animate itself. His pet started to tear at one of the tombs, making headway thanks to some powerful magical weapon the general himself used to tear great gouges into the onyx between him and his only hope at victory. The stone behemoth stood for a time, as due either to the collection of souls comprising its mind, or just its sheer size, it was quite slow to initiate actions. As the mounted manticore continued to make alarming headway towards the controlling elements of the Titan, I saw its onyx and obsidian mandibles start to yawn open. After stretching its jaws wide, the construct launched itself upwards, and layers of thin, flawlessly crafted gold wings fluttered at blinding speed to somehow, impossibly, grant the Khemric Titan flight. Dislodged and sent sprawling by the sudden ascent, the High Beastmaster managed to correct the course of his mount and recovered to face his foe. Just as he gave it orders to dodge and flash some magical trinket meant to safeguard them, the carved monstrosity brought its mandibles snapping shut with unerring accuracy. The impact with which those blades closed, I suspect, would kill just about anything in this world, and my employer was no exception. The front half of his mount, and the High Beastmaster himself, completely devoured. What remained of the Legion from the Tempest of Cain rallied around the sorceress, still a mighty force 100 strong, and I suspect she figured taking the power of the monster's shrine for herself would be quite the prize. They prepared to engage the construct once more, as it gracefully landed upon the sands before them. Before the caster could unleash her magics and order the rallied elites to charge, however, the Khemric Titan unleashed its most dread power. Before my very eyes, the various sacred symbols across the Colossus flared with arcane energy, revealing to me that each intoned the power of Usirian, the Nehekaran god of the underworld. As the last sigil encircling the creature's mouth pulsed to life, it opened the gore-coated jaws one last time. However, there came no wave of flesh-eating scarabs, or mandibles preparing to snap closed. Instead, I felt my gaze drawn into a black abyss contained within the Titan. Such pitch-black darkness. An utter pit, devoid of all things but death. I had seen such a thing only once before, and I will never forget the sight or its meaning. Taking out my mightiest talisman of protection and bracing myself for doom. This rift was a gateway to the domain of Usirian himself, the Nehekaran underworld. The fissure in reality contained within this monster caused a vortex, greedily attempting to suck in everything it could. The Druki hardly had time to scream, as all of their souls were ripped from their bodies and dragged mercilessly into the dark void, where an eternal hell awaited them. Within moments, it was over. The Khemric Titan closing the portal behind its obsidian jaws once more. I could only look on in shocked silence, as the immense construct flared one last time, using the winds of magic to repair its body back to immaculate perfection, before slowly digging down into the depths to resume its eternal vigil. Were I vulnerable to hunger and thirst like mortal men, I surely would have died during that venture. It takes quite some time to walk out of Nehekara by oneself, but at least I managed to earn some favor with the Tomb Kings when I informed them about the relatively unguarded Black Ark floating off the shore not far from Xandri. Oh, it was such a delight to receive excellent payment twice on that particular venture. And that is why, my dear student, you should always require compensation up front. As for the Khemric Titan, it truly is one of the dwindling marvels of a forgotten age. The Nehekarans lost the knowledge on how to create such behemoths long ago, but a few of those colossi remain functioning to this day. However, to be honest, they serve far more as warnings than anything else. For you see, each Titan was created for an explicit purpose. Each guards some site of extreme evil, protecting the world from unknown horrors that have been long forgotten by the world. Should you ever encounter a Khemric Titan, you would do well to leave them to their vigil. Though the odds of encountering one are so exceedingly small. They were incredibly difficult to craft, and only the absolute mightiest of kings or entire dynasties of warrior kin could be entrusted to animate such constructs effectively. Quite ponderous and slow, even when functioning perfectly, the true limiting aspect to these nightmarish behemoths is that they require staggering amounts of magic to awaken. Perhaps that is fortunate for us. As if the Tomb Kings of Nehekara could afford to utilize such colossi often, I suspect that the realms of the living would have fallen long ago. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching this episode of the Monstrous Arcanum, featuring the Khemric Titan. I hope you all enjoyed the legendary Uber monster of the Tomb Kings. Please hit that like button if you did, I really would appreciate it. And the main reason that I hope one day we'll see a Lord Pack-sized DLC for the Nehekaran Undead. Real quick, I would like to thank all of my patrons for their continued support, and of course my YouTube members and Twitch subs as well, and hope you're all enjoying the show. This has been a lot of fun to make, and we are getting closer and closer to the end. Let me give a big shout out to the Lords of Generosity here. Charles Bode, CJ Ubusta, Scion of the Emperor, Eric, Jeffrey Ramers, Wendell Short Eyes, and Higgins the Seagull. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell to all so you can know when the next video drops. And I'll see you all next time. Bye!